All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the September ADER Task Force workshop. I'm Jason Ryan. Joel Yu is going to be driving our PowerPoint deck today. For those of you that were on the meeting invite in Outlook for this, he sent around a copy. There's too big of a file to share in the chat, but we will post it on the interchange later today so that everybody has access to the slides. So just a reminder that we are recording this workshop like we do all of our workshops at the task force. And we will post a replay of this meeting on the task force YouTube channel, and we'll also provide it for the PUC so they have it for their records as well. Since we do have a number of dozens of people on today's call, the best way for folks to ask questions is using the raise hand feature on Teams. So if you raise your hand, it will put you in order, starting with number 1 through however many people have their raised hands, and we can work through questions most effectively that way. Once you're done with your raised hand, if you can unraise it, like I just did, that will tell the next person that they're ready to go. You can also use the chat feature to ask questions along the way if you don't want to interrupt the meeting and actually ask a question, but you wanted to ask something in the chat or put a resource for everybody in the chat, feel free to use that function as well. So with that housekeeping stuff out of the way, we'll go ahead and get started, and we will try to keep to our time commitment with you all to be done by 2 o'clock. However, I want to make sure we have a good discussion and get everybody's input. So we'll do a time check as we're kind of halfway through and see what we think about our ability to stay on time, and we'll just do that check at the hour before we start the second hour. We do have a goodly number of new task force members. So I wanted, before we start with an update from ERCOT, wanted to start by seeing if any of the new task force members wanted to introduce themselves. It's not a requirement, totally optional, but if you do, use the raise your hand feature and then just go in the order of your raised hands. Tell us who you are, what organization you're with, and anything else about you that you want us to know. And we'll try to do this in about 5 minutes, so pretty brief if you can. We'll start with number 1.
Hello, everyone. My name is Yichen Zhang. I'm currently assistant professor at University of Texas Arlington. So I joined the task force because UTA recently got an award from Department of Energy on actually studying the ADER and benefit for transmission system and impact for distribution system. So actually, I would like to express my appreciation for the support of the task force. I think without your support, and especially Jason, so I guess we cannot get the award. So thank you very much. And I hope to help as much as I can with our teams to support the task force and other studies.
Hey everybody, Suzanne Burton, and I am here today on behalf of Texas Solar Power Association. Mark Stover is the one who actually holds the seat for TSPA. Unfortunately, by the time this calendar invitation went out, he already had an unavoidable conflict, so he sends his apologies for not being here today. Anyway, I served on the task force for the first year that it was in existence, so I'm going to be working with Mark to support TSPA's work, and glad to be back in these conversations. Thank you.
Good afternoon, I guess technically. I'm Gary Koch. I'm with Guadalupe Valley Electric Cooperative. I'm the power supply manager here. Also on the call, sitting in for this first or next couple of meetings, is William Nichols. He's our executive manager of power supply. We're new to the task force. We're excited to be a part of this group and the opportunity to gain knowledge and insight and maybe contribute. So yeah, that's us.
Hi, everybody. I'm Michaela Spenrath. It's been a little while, but happy to rejoin the group. I'm representing the Houston Advanced Research Center. I think John Hall is the official seat holder, but I will actually be attending the meetings on his behalf. So I'm happy to be here. And I actually graduated from the University of Texas at Arlington. So go Mavs.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jim Galvin. I'm the Vice President, Power Supply and Risk Management at United Cooperative Services in Burleson, Texas. We're a new member to the task force, excited to bring our opportunities both to the task force and for our members to participate in ADR programs going forward. Happy to be a part of the new cooperatives and municipality segment. Look forward to working with you all.
Good morning, everybody. This is Manuel. I'm with Hunt Energy Network. I work in the policy and regulatory group. New to the group, but I've followed the group since its inception. So looking forward to engaging with everybody.
Hey, good afternoon. I'm Jared Ballou. I'm the Director of U.S. Policy with EV.Energy. We're a EV charging aggregator. So we work through telematics systems in electric vehicles as well as the charging equipment themselves to aggregate EV charging. We're started in the UK, so we've participated in the kind of wholesale market over there. And we also work with various utilities and retail providers in the US. Yeah, I'm excited to join the task force and bring our perspective.
And good afternoon. I'm David Vignes with AEP Texas. I'm the Alternative Energy Manager or Resource Manager for AEP Texas. Alex Ramirez was on the task force last year, and I am filling in for him and might be taking over for the rest of the year on the task force for Alex.
Hi, I'm Tracy Alexander with Reliant, a retail electricity provider. We've been actively part of the ADR pilot, but now on the task force. Glad to be here. And like many others, I'm representing Christina Rollins, who will probably be the person who is on these meetings going forward, but she is unavailable today, so you have me, but very happy to be on the task force officially and looking forward to today's conversation.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Russell-Smith. I am with Octopus Energy. Rajiv Shah is also with us. I am our head of flexibility for the US. So basically thinking about all our demand response work. And then we are an electricity retailer here in Texas, but also globally. We have a bunch of retail business, but many other businesses like software services for other utilities, etc. And I'm excited to be here. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jeff Gronwald, and I am the Distributed Energy Resources Specialist at Rayburn Electric Cooperative. We're headquartered here in Rockwall. I'm excited to be a part of this task force and work alongside with all of you. We worked a little bit with ERCOT during phase one, during our details of aggregation forms and just a lot of the blocky loads that we had at that time. Weren't able to qualify, so we're excited to see that phase 3 seems to be tackling that opportunity. So thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Samantha Crouch. I'm with Farmers Electric Cooperatives. We're in Northeast Texas, just east of Dallas. We are a distribution electric cooperative, and really looking forward to the opportunity to join this team and to hear the discussion, learn from this wonderful group. Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Hey everybody, Tori Villarreal, Head of Policy at Base Power Company. With me is Jared Green, our technical expert. He will be joining for majority of these meetings as well. Base is pretty new to the market, so grateful to be here collaborating with y'all. Thanks.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for going through the hand raise exercise and going through that on your own. That's the most efficient way for us to do this in our virtual meeting. So appreciate everybody doing that. And welcome to the task force to everybody that's new. Thank you for those of you that are new but have been following us on the journey the last 2 years. And for those of you that aren't yet on the task force but joining us today, we appreciate your input as well. And as we go through the presentations today, while I encourage the task force members to be engaged and make sure you ask your questions, I do want to make sure everybody does that. So if you're not on the task force, don't feel like you're just a fly on the wall, unable to fully participate. Welcome you to do the same thing. Raise your hand, use the chat, ask questions. This is not just a task force driven activity. This is a stakeholder driven activity. And we are supported by both folks at the PUC. Thank you for being on today, from OPUC, and as well as our friends at ERCOT. So we'll move into the first substantive item, which is an update from ERCOT. We appreciate, as always, ERCOT putting together material to kind of level set us with the current status of things. And then some of the content that ERCOT's going to raise is going to get us into some of the questions that we're going to dive into after we hear from Bandera's lessons learned. We're going to start tackling some of the issues in Commissioner Glatfelty's memo, starting with the roadmap to get to 80 megawatts and beyond. And so some of what ERCOT's going to present today as it relates to blocky loads will start to help inform that. So I encourage you to ask questions of ERCOT on some of what they present to make sure we fully understand some of the content they've put together. They spent a lot of time and thought on it. So with that, I'll turn it over to either Ryan or Mark or both of you.
Thanks very much, Jason. Just to check, can you all hear me okay?
We can.
Excellent. Well, good afternoon to the ADER task force. And my name is Ryan King. I'm Manager Market Design. Myself and Mark are pleased to be able to present a bit of an update to the task force on our activities that have taken place over the course of recent months, and some thinking that we've been doing when it comes to phase 3 participation. Perfect. So on this slide, you can essentially see a status update on where we are in the pilot. At the top, you can see that we have 2 ADRs actively participating in the pilot today, and we've included the capacity that they are offering into the real-time energy market, and also the eligibility of what they are able to provide with respect to non-spin and ECRS. We do have additional ADRs that have ERCOT accepted details of the aggregation or DOTA forms. I've also included the capacity amounts that are on there, just an update from previous slides. On the right-hand side, you can kind of see roughly where these resources are geographically located. And we're also seeing activity on a number of these ADRs. So there's some in various stages, but a number of them are updating their DOTAs, working on the telemetry validation and qualification processes. So there continues to be an active queue when it comes to participation in this phase. Next slide. This slide is basically a snapshot. It's an overview of the latest pilot participation stats. I don't think I necessarily need to go through it at this point. It's just an overview of where we are with respect to the approved megawatts and how things sit with respect to the limits that were derived as a function of this pilot. I'll note also that this updated limits of participation tracking document is also available on the ADER ERCOT webpage. Next slide. So in terms of some of the activities that we have been doing in this phase, We continue to have regular discussions with active and prospective participants, things related to telemetry validation requirements, market testing, submission requirements. We also manage frequent updates to details of the aggregation submission forms to review and validate and also provide feedback on any issues or deficiencies. So that's a fairly regular churn of activity that we see via the pilot inbox. And then we have a dedicated group of experts that kind of review those as they come in. We also spend a fair amount of time when it comes to scheduling and performing ancillary service testing and qualification. And we also have a fair amount of periodic meetings with current and prospective participants from far and wide who simply want to understand the ADER pilot, where they may be able to participate or support this pilot. So there's a continuing interest from current and prospective participants, and we're very happy to see that. Next slide. This is really going to be the bulk of ERCOT's update here. At the same time that we're managing the day-to-day administration and development of the pilot, we also are turning our minds around what we could think about when it comes to phase 3 of this pilot. So we've had a number of discussions where we're trying to understand where the current design may be creating barriers to participation and what opportunities can be realized from ERCOT's perspective. And that focus has really been around this question of participation. Obviously, we're pleased with the amount of participation that we have at this point, but we also are looking for ways to expand that and see more of these resources participating. And so to that end, we've been devoting more attention to enable so-called blocky load resource types. And that's really loads that may not have a linear ramp or necessarily be a resource that could follow 5-minute sched base points, but would still have the ability to provide one or more market services. We started looking at what we have today and where we think there might be an existing approach or framework that could be utilized as a vehicle to enable additional participation and load types. My colleague Mark Patterson is going to go through this in a little bit more detail. We also think that as we sort of looked through this framework and what it involved and some of the rules and requirements, we think this may have some incidental benefit to some of the questions that Commissioner Glotfelty had raised in his memo. For instance, under the non-sched blocky load model that we'll get into in the next slide, the QSE representing the resource, at least in principle, does not have to be the QSE representing the premise or electric provider as the load serving entity. So that's an important consideration. It's not to necessarily say that that's an endorsement. It's just something that we wanted to note that as a feature of this, because this resource is not being settled in the 5-minute sched, there are different ways of looking at some of these issues. But I'm going to pause there, and I may pass things over to Mark Patterson. Mark's going to go over through what this framework looks like in a little bit more detail as it pertains to the participation in the ADER.
Thank you, Ryan. This is Mark. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Will you move on to the next slide? All right. So, as Ryan explained, we're looking at ways to expand the participation model for this pilot project. And as many of you are probably aware, on the load resource side, we have two different concepts. We have the controllable load resources, which are those that can follow the base points, that's what we've been piloting using that construct in phase 1 and phase 2, where they follow base points. Yes, sir.
I see Resme had her hand open.
I'm sorry.
he hasn't covered the point. It is the third bullet. So I'll let him finish the slide and then I can ask.
Okay. And then the other concept that we have for load resources is what we call the non-controllable load resources. And that's really what we're looking at, expanding the participation model for phase 3. And this would enable loads that aggregations of devices that really cannot follow base points, but should be able to participate, because we know blocky loads can provide many services because of the extensive participation we have as non-controllable loads today, where we have hundreds of load resources provide that are registered qualified over what 7,000 to 8,000 megawatts in total. So that's what we're proposing to build upon for phase 3. These loads will register in Rio and get modeled as a non-controllable load resource. They will, just like any load resource, they will be required to provide through the QSC 2-second telemetry. And in this case, they would be using the telemetry attributes for non-controllable load resources. Those are all defined in section 6552 of the protocols, if you're interested in looking those up. And kind of the last bullet on this slide, which was already mentioned, is since these resources will not have a bid to buy for SCAD dispatch, we find that then the requirement that's in 3.6.1 paragraph 4 of the protocols for phase 1 and phase 2 required that the QSC representing the ADER must be the same QSC who represents the LSC. Well, that would no longer apply in the case of the blocky load model. So let's go ahead and move to the next one. Next slide.
So can I ask a question?
Sure. Sorry, Rosemary.
No worries. Thank you, Mark and Ryan, for opening up the blocky load for ADER. That this is a really great direction and would definitely help bring more resources. So appreciate the work on that one. The 2-second telemetry, you are expecting that for the aggregate level, right? So it's the QEC telemetry, and you're not expecting that for the resource level or the individual premise level?
Right. No, it'll be an aggregate of all the devices and sites that make up the resource.
And the point on the QEC can be different. How is that then addressing the money? I don't know how to say it there. The SCAD, what is the word? The reason why we couldn't implement loads in SCAD, the payment money transfer, how is that addressed here?
Well, Rosemary, it's the same exact concept we have with any load, non-controllable load resource today. So the QSC that represent a non-controllable load resource today does not, and in many cases is not the same QSC that represents the REP, the retail electric provider serving energy to those loads. So it's no different than what we do in all cases today with the non-controllable load resources.
Okay, so the double payment issue, I think it is that is not there then.
Well, there's no double payment because we don't pay for the energy for the non-controllable load resources anyway.
Okay, maybe I'll talk to you offline. Thanks.
Okay. Let's go ahead and move to the next slide. And let me be so really when we get to the next
question you have a question from Ned too. Sorry, Mark.
Okay, I'm sorry, Ned. Go ahead.
That's all right, Mark. So Reshmi had just hit on one of the things I was going to ask, and that is, the LMP minus proxy $G cross settlement provision that was settled upon by TAC. It was like 10 years ago. I understand that doesn't necessarily apply currently in this for NCLRs, but I think there's probably some qualitative distinctions to make there. Whereas with the current NCLR providers, you're going to have mostly large resources that are contracting one-on-one with a rep, and that can be communicated. Whereas, and taken into account with the hedging approach, whereas expanding to the aggregated model could present a lot of the same concerns that the loads and skid version 2 and LMP presented, that resulted in the LMP minus dollar proxy G. I always get that wrong. So I just wanted to raise that as a conceptual distinction there. But the other thing that I wanted to ask and just confirm is, in this blocky participation model, that is only for providing ancillary services. It would not allow the ADER to participate in SCED. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Thanks for confirming.
Okay. As we move to the next slide, I wanted to.
Mark, sorry to interrupt you again. You got Resmi back.
Sorry, Mark.
That was quick, Resmi.
I just have a quick question for, are you expecting then all of the ancillary service that ADER currently provides will be then extended to the blocky as well?
Right now, phase 3 is only, I don't believe there's any discussion right now of extending it beyond non-spin and ECRS. So yes, they would be able to provide both of those.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And Rajiv has his hand up too.
Yeah, I don't want to belabor the point, but we kind of see the same sort of issue that Ned was pointing out there, especially with respect to sort of smaller resources. And as a rep, we're not going to necessarily know the same way you would with sort of larger interests due to the sort of relationship, what, let's say, a residential customer might be doing, and that's just like a hedging risk for us that is problematic. So just want to point that out.
Well, and I guess my comment to all of these concerns would be, I think what we're stating is Protocol 361 paragraph 4 was very clear that it applied to controllable load resources where a bid to buy was in place. Since these don't have a bid to buy, we're saying, I think maybe a better way of saying is that wouldn't have to apply. I think the task force, that may be something the task force may want to discuss more in detail and determine if they want to keep that in place or not. We're just saying there wouldn't be a requirement the way the protocol is worded in that section that it would have to remain in place. Okay. This slide, and this is the only other slide really I have on the blocky load concept. But let me just be clear. I didn't list every requirement to participate as a blocky load under this model change. I'm only listing those that would change based on what is currently already a requirement under the under phase 1 and phase 2. So I'm only listing the changes. If it's not listed here, that means those, whatever the other requirements are, they would not be changing for this concept. Really, the more significant, the two significant changes are, and I think everybody's aware, we have continued to evolve with telemetry validation. And one of the things that we're also proposing, and the problem really with telemetry validation seems to be when the resource is very small. And when I don't mean small in numbers of sites, I'm talking about very small number of kW. That's when it gets really difficult especially to meet the criteria that we've used even in phase 2, because phase 2 evolved even from phase 1. So if the aggregation is smaller than and this smaller than 1 megawatt, we're proposing that part of the metric, which currently says that 10% of the device level data must be within, well, it must be within the telemetry value must be within 10% of the 15-minute settlement to interval meter data. We're going to modify that where if it's less than 1 megawatt, that will increase that. It just must be within 50% of the data. So that should at least help. We're comfortable that that's not an that should be an acceptable change for ERCOT at the very small end. At the very high end, if you're greater than a megawatt, then the 10%, then it still must be within 10% of the aggregate of the 15-minute meter data. So again, hopefully that'll allow the smaller resources to get through the telemetry validation process, which seems to be one of the bigger issues that we've seen resources have. And then the other thing is for performance validation. Since we will use the same validation that we use for any non-controllable load resource today, providing ancillary services, and that's using the meter before, meter after concept, which is an average of the telemetry values 5 minutes before the instruction to measure that at the at the end of the ramp. What the resource is actually showing, and the delta will determine if they met their obligation or not. That's really the big changes. So it's not that much to that we're proposing, but we believe with introducing the blocky load concept, we're hoping to see significant additional opportunities for people to participate in the pilot. Any other questions on this part? Ryan, I don't think you and I actually talked about who's going to the next steps. You want to go ahead and work through the next steps?
So basically the way we are looking at this is we'll have some items right before us where we'll continue engaging with current participants on everything from submissions, validation, and qualification. But we also are going to take a look at the current governing document that has been started and start to identify where we see opportunities to make these changes that would be needed for this blocky load concept. There will be some fairly extensive red lines to the existing document, simply because we're talking about a new framework here. So it has to have all the commensurate requirements with this participation model. So effectively, we will have, if this goes through, this will be 2 different participation models. Just another kind of subset here is that likely that we see a lot of benefit here. And based on some initial discussion, we see that this may be a very positive way to enable additional participation. But as always, and I think we know this, that's a function of who is available to provide this and when. So we don't really have a hard understanding of how many megawatts this would actually enable. But we think that by removing, or rather enabling, this kind of participation model, some of the resources that may hitherto have been on the sidelines may feel that this addresses enough for them to get involved in the ADR pilot. Joel, go ahead.
Hey, Ryan. Thanks for the presentation. I guess a question in terms of like the work that ERCOT has to do to implement this in the governing document. Do you have like a sense of a target timeline to complete this review and have language together? And I guess as a part 2 of the question, I guess to what extent does like the focus on the blocky load effort, restrict ERCOT's ability to, possibly work on parallel, like other ADER improvement issues in the near term?
So I would say that we have started just internally drafting some of these red lines. I'm a little hesitant to give like a date certain because I think that as this meeting has kind of demonstrated, there may be some policy questions that we would want to iterate with the task force and individual participants to understand what we would want to see in this phase 2 governing document. And we'd also want the opportunity to, share our initial drafts and get feedback kind of similar to what we did with respect to phase 2. For the other issue that you mentioned, I guess it kind of depends on what the issue is. I think the way that we have kind of approached things thus far is we've tried to take we are a little bit resource constrained. So to some extent, we've tried to focus on the kind of biggest bang for the buck, if you will. And we think that based on the discussions we've had, this seems like the one that has the clearest chance of success. And we have done some internal discussion with some of the folks who are on our systems integration, and it doesn't actually seem that there would need to be much in the way of system changes. As Mark mentioned, there already is an NCLR participation framework. So the ground has already been laid. It's just a question of enabling that in the governing document, but we would want to make sure that some of these issues that we've kind of pointed out here have been discussed, and there may be some concerns on the participant side, not necessarily the ERCOT side, that we would want to have reflected in that document. So I guess that's a little bit roundabout, but we're certainly not saying we're not open to other things. We certainly are. But I think based on the information we have at this point, we would probably see this as the priority in place of others. But we would not stop discussions and work on other things. It's more a question of prioritization.
Thanks for that.
Martha, go ahead.
I was just going to say, yeah, I mean, as always, if somebody brings something up and it sounds like a home run concept, we'd be very happy to start internal discussions on it. So, but this one seems to be the one where, like Ryan said, we're focusing on right now because we think it's the biggest bang for the buck.
Martha, you have a question?
It might just be me, but I can't hear if Martha's asking a question.
No, I can't hear her either.
Okay.
Maybe it's a microphone input.
All right, we'll go to Amy first then.
Hey all, thanks for the presentation and on how you're thinking about this blocky proposal, and appreciate laying out the next steps. I think just being open to thinking about the next opportunity to provide input. It sounds like staff is open to meeting with current pilot participants. I think I guess I just would love a takeaway. We're going to look at this internally, come up with, kind of run the traps, and then come back to ERCOT, but also to the full group, and see what could be, what works, and if there's anything that still might be missing or a barrier. Because from my standpoint, would love to make sure if we're doing this, it will actually work. And so love the opportunity to get in here proactively and check with our team. But I think we're headed in a good direction.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks. It's Martha Henson from Encore. So this question to the ERCOT folks. So it seems like the concept up to now is that each ADER has to have some amount of injection within it, but what I think I'm inferring from the phase 3 and NCLR proposal is that may be different. Can you kind of speak to that a little bit?
Mark, are you okay to cover that one?
Well, I'll be honest, internally, we didn't discuss if we were going to be modifying that part of the pilot. So it seems to me that it should still be an aggregation that has some devices that have export capability, which I think was the core thing we were trying to test during the pilot.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Yeah, that makes sense to me. I wasn't sure if that was still, what I wasn't sure how that fit into the NCLR participation model, but it sounds like that's still the intent, is that the ADER would have to be able to inject at least something as well.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Martha. Greg, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I dropped my question in the chat, but I can read it. I'm just curious if phase 2 is wrapping up, and if so, is there still an opportunity to talk about participating in RRS potentially without SCED dispatch responsibilities, much like has been relaxed for proposed phase 3?
Well, the RRS concept, I mean the blocky load concept, definitely is not contemplating providing RRS as a non-controllable load resource. So
right, this would be unique to the resources that can follow frequency up and down like a traditional generator following a droop curve.
So you're talking about on the controllable as a controllable load.
Potentially. I guess my question is, if we're able to relax the 5-minute base point instruction requirement for blocky loads, is there an opportunity to do so for resources that can provide primary frequency response without SCED? And I can get to this when we give our update, but the punchline is if we're trying to identify things that are discouraging participation, real-time telemetry and SCED dispatch are two big hurdles, and there's a lot of really well-suited distributed storage devices that can follow primary frequency response up and down. And if we're able to obviate the need for a 5-minute dispatch, that could encourage third-party participation.
So then, Greg, to get to your point, from currently the way ERCOT is looking at phase 3 is we have not considered expanding it to that point.
Okay, it was part of phase 2, so I'm still catching up as to where we're at in the process, but thanks for the feedback.
Okay, next question.
Okay, thanks for the presentation. I'm Jaeun Chung from Shared Energy, and let me get back to the blocky participation issue for a while. If nodal protocol section 3.6.14 no longer applies to ADERs that have opted out of SCED but are opting into ancillary services, can a single QSE represent multiple LSEs as long as the ADERs served by those LSEs only provide ancillary services?
I think that's correct. If we can go back to the couple of slides, I think that's more or less what we said. Yes. So I don't want to necessarily legally interpret, but I think basically the application of 3.6.14 would not applicable. So it would not be applicable. So it could be the case that the QSE representing the ADR could be a QSE who's different than the one who represents the LSC. But maybe I'll just check if Mark has a different interpretation there.
No, what you said, I agree with Ryan. I didn't catch the entire question. So maybe if that could be restated.
Okay, so my question was, can a single QSE represent multiple LSEs as long as the ADER served by those LSEs only provide ancillary services?
Yeah, that's how I would understand that. Yes.
I think we would still,
Thank you.
just one thing to note on that is I think we would still have the requirement that they have to be within the same TDSP. Yeah.
Right. Yes.
So that's not changing.
Okay, thank you.
But they wouldn't all have to be under the same LSE.
In principle. That's
Yeah.
All right. Any final questions for ERCOT before we turn over to Bandera? Certainly appreciate Ryan and Mark, you putting a lot of thought into what you wanted to go over today, and appreciate people asking questions. You know, when we get to the part of the agenda to start working through Commissioner Glatfelty's questions on the roadmap to get to 80 megawatts and beyond, obviously blocky participation model is on that list, and we can have more discussion at that time. But any final questions before we move on to Bandera? All right. Thanks, Ryan and Mark. John, I don't know if you're going to lead us off.
Yeah, I'll kick it off. Thank you, Jason.
Yeah.
And good afternoon, everybody. My name is John Padalino. I'm the General Counsel, Chief Administrative Officer at Bandera Electric, and I think I'm our part-time ADER operator as well. I'll be presenting today with, along with Jeff Glasgow. Jeff is our ApolloWare product manager. And what I thought I'd do is just walk you through, give you an overview, especially for a lot of the new folks who are on the task force. And we can go ahead and go to the next slide. Just to give you some background, Bandera Electric has really been involved in transforming our utility for the past 10 years now. 10 years ago, we surveyed our members, asked them what they wanted, and probably at the time we were like maybe like a lot of utilities. We had some dusty light bulbs sitting in the warehouse that is known as the Mule Barn at Bandera Electric. And we were just selling kilowatt hours, and we weren't too focused on creating the utility of the future. But we asked our members what they wanted, and they told us they wanted three things. One was high-speed broadband. Another was renewable and energy efficiency options. And the third thing was options to finance renewable and energy efficiency. And so in 2016, we started selling behind-the-meter solar and battery storage solutions to our members. And at the same time, our good friends just to the east of us in San Antonio at CPS, they were offering a very robust rebate program, which created a lot of a kind of big economy of third-party solar installers that were not only selling in San Antonio, but coming to our members. And unfortunately, some solar installers sell solar by telling folks that they'll never have an electric bill again, that they'll make more money than they're spending on their electric bill, and a variety of things like that. And so once our members would spend money from those third parties, and then they would get an electric bill, they'd call us. And, you know, in order to have that conversation, we really landed on creating our platform called ApolloWare, and it's a hardware and software solution that we started building in 2017. And essentially what we did is we solved the blocky problem that you'll see later on with our data, really by moving the electric meter from where it is. I mean, we still have the electric meter, but we install a device level meter that measures generation and consumption at the circuit level with current transducers. And that data comes back to the cloud in real time. So we have 1 second data at whatever circuit that we measure. We started by requiring ApolloWare in 2019 on all interconnected solar and storage devices. And then in 2020, we revamped our solar and storage program to be a holistic energy efficiency program, where the first level of that is installing ApolloWare, because it gives you real-time energy feedback. And just by having real-time energy feedback, once you actually know how you use electricity, our members would save 10 to 15% off their electric bill. And that data has been verified by Michael Weber and the group at Ideasmiths. And so that's, our first view of energy efficiency, ADER, whatever you want to call it, is really to inform consumers about how they use electricity. Along our program, we'll finance energy efficiency improvements, and then we'll finance solar and storage from Bandera Electric. And that's what really built us the platform and the fleet that was at our fingertips in 2022 when I joined the task force as one of the first members. And I guess it's probably good right now to quote Thomas Edison, who said that opportunity is often overlooked because it's in overalls and looks like hard work. And I think most of our members actually wear coveralls instead of overalls, but we're all used to hard work, and building ApolloWare and building the ADR that we ultimately got qualified this summer was a lot of hard work that we started in earnest last year by focusing on a fleet of Enphase batteries. And I think with that, I'll turn it over to Jeff Glasgow, who will take you through, I guess, some background. So I was testifying last fall at the winter weather readiness workshop that the Utility Commission was having, and Commissioner McAdams asked me if I could build a demand response program by Christmas. And so this was late October, I think, and I, probably talked too much and said, sure, I can do it. And so we went back and we started building a battery subscription program with our members. And I had the first site energized and fully dispatchable by Christmas. So I sent a note over to the Utility Commission saying, hey, we said we could do it, and we did it. And we kept building from there. And, we really broke down our ADER development into two pieces. One was connecting ApolloWare up through our QSE, who is LCRA, the Lower Colorado River Authority, up to ERCOT through the ICCP connection. So that's integrating the ApolloWare cloud back into a SCADA server, and then or the ICCP server, and then getting that data up to ERCOT. And then the second phase was building the platform into the Enphase API platform so we could control that fleet of batteries. And so that took the better part of really all of this year. We've been laser focused. Some people may say we were OCD, psychotically focused on getting this accomplished. And it really just took all hands on deck, all of us learning the protocols, because we're a distribution electric co-op. We didn't understand the ERCOT protocols. We knew the words were in English, but we had never seen them put together that way. And so just learning how to communicate with the ERCOT and all of that has been a huge learning experience. But Jeff's going to take you through the testing that started in July. Jeff?
Yeah. Thanks, John. Thanks for the opportunity, everybody. I'll try to get through this pretty quickly so we have some questions at the end, or feel free to raise your hand as I go through it. But kind of the headlines here are, we passed SCED test in our first attempt in July. That portion of the test was technically very challenging. That was the one we had that kind of kept us up at night for sure. On the other hand, telemetry, we thought with our data set, we thought we'd be pretty good. That took a few times to get through that qualification, but we ultimately passed that in August. And as of this month, we're now participating in the market, bidding in the market now as an ADER. So we're fully qualified with SCED and telemetry, and provisionally qualified for non-spin and ECRS. We'll be focused on ECRS qualification in October. I think we have a date set for October 15th to test with ERCOT on that one. We found that it's just a top level, before I get into some of the testing results, it is possible to meet the requirements. I think the device level real-time energy feedback that John mentioned that ApolloWare provides is probably really key to our underlying solution. We also learned through multiple trials and tribulations, the interconnection of these these devices, the system, like what John described, from connected in-phase batteries to their API, to LCRA, up to ERCOT through the ICC connection. There are a lot of points of failure. And so we had to do a lot of programming to manage edge cases, build some resiliency into the platform, and a lot of testing, to make sure we were managing these things programmatically. And of course, reporting and monitoring. I think particularly as we got into, it's one thing to qualify, but as we got through the qualification process, we realized we really need to think about operationalizing this. And that's what we're doing right now, is we're turning this into, a system that can be operated on an ongoing basis. To focus on SCED real fast, we tested, so SCED, you guys are all familiar with this. We're talking about blocky curves. We were also very, very freaked out by this. I think we had a lot of sessions with ERCOT to kind of really get to this final solution. I'm really proud of the team for accomplishing this, but essentially this is a snapshot of our July 9th SCED results. It was kind of a fun day. We were sitting there in an open call with ERCOT. It kind of felt like we were in a NASA control room. And about 20 minutes into the test, they kind of said, okay, we're satisfied. And we kind of looked around and was like, does that mean we passed or what? But it turns out we did. You can see the blue line there is the base point that ERCOT's sending. And you can see that smooth red line is our system performance there, falling at the 5-minute interval requirement. To talk about, sorry here, let me find my slide here. Telemetry, just to recap everybody, I think Mark hit on this actually. But essentially, we schedule an 8-hour test window with ERCOT, and then 50% of those 15-minute intervals in that window, so 4 hours, that 8-hour period, you have to discharge or charge above 10% of the maximum capacity that you have. And then you have to be within 10% of the aggregated device level data for each of those 15-minute intervals. This took a few tries, honestly, and we learned a lot, particularly in this. We had a fairly small ADER that where any kind of error at any site would cause this to fail ultimately. So if you lose comms or API goes out with in-phase for a little bit, which all those things did happen and can happen and will happen, it will fail ultimately. And so we learned a lot in this process. We actually increased the size of our ADER along the way, updated our DOTA, and went through it, but ultimately got to a qualification of about close to 98% accuracy. We were really pleased with the accuracy on this. In fact, we were fairly close on the test prior to this. There's always just one window. We had a comms outage at a site. A member reset a router. I think we had a UDP value we were controlling on our side to simulate this. Kind of got stuck in the system, so to speak, and it caused one of these windows to fall out of bounds. So a lot of lessons learned that we're going to bake into the system, into ApolloWare moving forward. We can talk about that in just a few slides.
And the lesson that is really underlying all of these numbers here is that I think we need to be 100% focused on the consumer as the ADER task force. I mean, I don't know that we really have a consumer representative except maybe TEPRI on this task force. The co-ops on the task force are obviously member owned, so we're very consumer focused. But you have to be consumer focused, especially if we want to think of the whole load as being part of an ADER, where you're going to have everything from a refrigerator to a thermostat to a battery storage system that can participate. Because what we found, I mean, Jeff touched on it. We did, I think, 5 telemetry tests, and you could see charts like this of every test. But there was one interval where maybe a human intervened and decided to reset their router, or one of our tests was what we call CrowdStrike Friday. And we're not sure why that site went down. They were on a different internet provider, but that site just lost internet for about 12 minutes. And so we were getting the really high level of accuracy in all intervals, except if you fail any one interval, you fail the test entirely, which I think is a good standard, because really we have a small ADER, but we feel very confident that when we scale our ADER, that accuracy is going to maintain. And I feel like the bigger you're off in accuracy as you scale it, the problems are only going to get bigger, because you're going to have all those premises and all those humans involved in resetting routers. And really, it's a communications issue as much as it is an electricity issue.
Yeah, absolutely, John. kind of keep going just to cover some lessons learned and improvements. We can have some discussion at the end, but we'll step through some qualification notes. Talk a little bit about site reliability. John will touch on the road to 80 megawatts, and then we'll talk about the value of independent telemetry. So getting into this, I think Ryan and Mark did a good job of noting the work that ERCOT does to work with folks that are working to qualify for ADER. We certainly were recipients of that. We met with ERCOT a lot. Interpreting the requirements that they have into actual technical architecture is challenging. So that was invaluable to have those sessions. Thank you to ERCOT for that support. I think capacity matters. Like we mentioned, I think starting with a smaller size ADER helped us identify some of these issues that we know will need to be in place as we scale up. So we did start small. We increased the size of that over our testing period, and we're currently ramping up from here. Member awareness is key. We are so focused on the technical requirements of this and getting ready from a technical standpoint. We were probably a little lax in our communication with the members about when we were going to actually go through this testing process and really partnering with them, and that improved tremendously as we went through this process. And I think it's working well today. And as we look at, we want to get to focus on thermostats. We're thinking about a much broader array of customers. So how do we bake that into our ethos? And to John's point, always kind of keeping that end customer in mind is going to be key. So site reliability, this is something that all these batteries, the Enphase batteries are out in the wild. They were BEC owned batteries, right? And we have BEC fiber going to most of these locations, and we got them as kind of resilient as possible. But even then, micro failures occur, and they will continue to occur. Particularly when we start to think about BYO batteries and other types of devices, other OEMs. Even Enphase's APIs, it can be finicky sometimes, right? These are just realities of a technical architecture. So how do we think about site reliability and think about capacity factors? So when we're bidding in the market, how do we make sure that we have enough capacity to meet that bid, right? So right now, our system will now, if a site loses communications, will automatically pull that out of the ADER and retelemeter values to ERCOT to inform them, the LPC and MPC, right? And so they'll understand where our capacity is, but we still need to meet that obligation we have. So keeping things in reserve so that we can then bring those online when we have outages. This is going to be just a reality of this system and this world, we think. So we're really grateful for these learnings, but I think continue to think about how we algorithmically control each of these devices is going to be key. And I think would encourage anyone on the call that's looking at this to think about this in advance, right? Because this is going to be, like I said, the reality of this environment. So one of the things we also found is that, if we were solely reliant on Enphase's technical stack, their API, we wouldn't have been able to do this. We really needed that real-time data set that ApolloWare provides, having the device level data, to understand what's actually going on. So we're not relying on statistical models or prediction models, right? So this was kind of key. And I think that as we look at expanding to other OEMs, which we're actively working on right now, having that independent telemetry so that we can control at all times and understand what's really going on without being dependent on that third-party technology, especially as you start to think about just a wide array of providers out there that we want to incorporate in that open access platform. I think this is going to be a key for us. So we're going to kind of really lean into this as a important part of the solution. And John, do you want to talk to the road to 80?
Yeah, a couple weeks ago, I filed some comments in this project about trying to address Commissioner Glotfelte's call for how do we get to a road to 80. And a lot of my comments said 80 megawatts and beyond, and probably goes with Jeff's point that, you're always going to need to have some sites in reserve because if you think you have 80, maybe you're bidding 60. And so if we want to actually have 80 megawatts in the market, we're going to need a lot more than that registered. One of the things, I really want to focus on and encourage the task force to take up is focusing on the smart thermostats and the HVACs. I mean, the fact of the matter is that most Texans don't own solar and storage. I know we hear the thousands of devices that are out there, and we're working with them, and we're trying to integrate as much as we can. But we know that the biggest bang for our buck and really the peak the peak periods, the issue in Uri was the thermostats. The issue at any peak time on the grid is the thermostats, and especially residential use of heating and cooling, because right now those consumers aren't paid to reduce their consumption. And so the numbers are, they're there for everybody to see, but 1.3 million homes with smart thermostats, if we just converted about 3% of them and enrolled them into an ADER, we could hit that 80 megawatt goal. And then also just expanding beyond thermostats, of course, keep focusing on the battery storage systems that are out there. We're good friends with Tesla and Enphase, and we're excited to see EV chargers being part of the task force. But, we just need to think of the nuts and bolts, the blocking and tackling of appliances that are out there, pool pumps, water heaters, etc. And then, we have a solution that could be deployed today and really solve the issues without having to change any of the ERCOT protocols. I was talking with someone yesterday and they said, oh, if we changed the rules, maybe I could have got in as the top 15% at Texas A&M. And I think, there's a reason we have these rules in place. And, I'm glad to see we're going to keep that 2-second requirement, because electricity works in real time, and that's just the way it is. And I think the market, that's the design there. I'm glad that ERCOT's thinking about how do we get more enrollment, but we wanted everyone to know that we have a solution that's road tested, qualified, validated, and already participating in ERCOT that could deploy across all of ERCOT. And then the final thing is really incentivizing rollout, as far as, talking to how do we convince our moms that you should give up control of your thermostat. And I think, the other day I was having breakfast in Bernie, and me and the waiter were talking, and he said, hey, you should go fill up your car. Gas just went up to $2.99. And every Texan knows how much gas is, but I don't think any Texan knows much about our task force and what they could make from this task force. So, we have as much of a marketing problem as a technical problem. And again, we just wanted to report our lessons learned to show that a small electric co-op outside of San Antonio could come up with a solution, and it's available ERCOT wide.
Bob, you have a question?
Yeah, you were saying one of the important things was the independent monitoring in real time. Can you talk, and I'm sorry, I haven't attended recent meetings, but can you tell me a little bit quickly about the device and what that cost? Is this something you added?
Yeah, the device is essentially the same price as the electric meter that goes out there today, but the device can do a single phase or 3-phase system, and it can measure up to 480 volts, can take 15 channels, and so we could monitor a variety of devices, which I think is the goal ultimately, where a home doesn't just have a battery, right? It has an HVAC system, it has a whole bunch of different things using electricity. And we're already measuring all of those on the sites in Bandera that we use. And I think if you really wanted to build out a utility-wide, ERCOT-wide program, you'd want to measure all those different circuits, and it would be able to meet the telemetry requirements without changing any protocols. So
I'm sorry, but to be clear, you replace the meter with something that's giving you that.
We still have our standard, quote unquote smart meter installed, and that's what we use for billing, but we install this at the circuit panel inside the panel.
Oh, okay. Thank you. That's what I wanted to know. Yeah.
Yep.
And how does that affect the economics of this? I mean, given that, it's not huge payoff for a single thermostat, how much did it cost to put that on the panel?
Sorry. Well, so we use this as a holistic program, and just by saving on the electricity, by having that real-time energy feedback, our members.
John, you want to mute there, I think, John. I think he was getting at, our members save 10 to 15% on average, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
It's part of a more comprehensive offering for all your customers, and you figure it'll pay off over time. Okay.
That's right. Yeah.
Great. Very impressive, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob. Well, I think it's, hey, Ned, you have a question?
Oh, I just wanted well, I also wanted to say, very impressive work that y'all have done. Congratulations in getting across the finish line and getting up and running. That's quite a feat. And I know a lot of folks have been working hard on, so it's good to see diversity in the outcome. I know that's been a goal of the task forces since early on. So really,
Sure.
Really value seeing y'all get there, and thank you for bringing this forward. John, one of the things that you mentioned, I think is also something else that I think is important, which has been a goal of this task force is set a high bar and let the market rise to it, and don't move the goalposts, but get the team ready to play on a professional field. And I think you've shown that that can be done. So just a second kudos.
Well, thanks for that, Ned. I think, yeah, and we'll kind of open this up. We've had a number of meetings kind of on our experiences with many of the task force members here, in fact. So our door's open if you guys ever want to collaborate or help. We understand, the challenges here, and I think we're more than happy to share. Like, the cooperative mindset is, cooperatives helping cooperatives. So our door's open. I think we'll kind of end with this slide here. Let you guys get back to the main content here. Where I think Greg was going to maybe speak to some of his experience at Tesla. Is that correct? Yeah, we could probably skip this one.
Sure. Thank you. And I appreciate that presentation, John. Congratulations. It's a tremendous accomplishment. Just for a quick update on our ADER experience, since we've last met, I had a more formal presentation. We've launched ECRS as part of the offering from our ADER fleet, and continue to offer non-spend as well as ECRS. We had hoped to see some exploration of providing RRS as part of phase 2, and it sounds like that's kind of slipped through the cracks, and that may be on me. It's been some time since I discussed it. For the benefit of the task force, our offering as a OEM and a retailer is very much a beta. And in doing so, we're trying to create an environment where we can protect the customer's primary investment thesis for the device, extend the use of solar, minimize grid usage, and sell ancillary services where capacity is available after satisfying those first 2 goals. And in doing so, we're continuing to refine this offering. We're continuing to develop it as the ink dries on the pilot protocols, and look forward to these being a permanent part of the protocols so that we can further expand that offering. I will say it is beneficial to consider RRS as part of phase 3, since it kind of got passed over in phase 2. Our fleet can follow 5-minute instructions and provide primary frequency response. Some of my earlier comments were focused on if we can relax the SCED performance requirement, and then extend that to those storage devices, which isn't unique to Powerwalls, to include primary frequency response. You can get a lot of value that is complementary to the use case of the customer. Said another way, batteries are very excellent providers of PFR, as we see on the wholesale side. When extended to the residential storage solutions, they can serve all of their goals: reduce grid usage, extend the use of solar, and provide primary frequency response. As I mentioned, our fleet is capable of following 5-minute base points, we believe, and I think what I've heard today supports it, that it's a lift to get to a 5-minute dispatch. It's a lift to get kilometer data to and from devices. And on the traditional wholesale providers of primary frequency response, we assess that capability in arrears. That a different way, if there's a primary frequency response, it's seen on a meter, and that meter demonstrates that during a frequency event on the grid, the provider of that service fulfilled their obligations. And when we put that assessment in arrears, not only do we rely less upon more real-time data points, but we also get a faster than SCED response. Primary frequency response is on the time horizon of 2 seconds. So cycles in most instances. Nonetheless, I hope that we consider it not only for the devices of our manufacturer, but it is a way to enable more capacity. It is a way to enable capacity to be aggregated devices of different manufacturers. So multiple storage providers could create an aggregation, or utilities or owners of multiple storage types could create an aggregation to provide RRS if the PFR requirement were enforced and the SCID requirement were relaxed. So something to think about. I know we're making a lot of progress and we're on different wavelengths in many instances, but we're still working really hard to get more offerings out there and look forward to seeing the task force continue to succeed.
Thank you, Greg. Any questions for Greg? John, do you have a?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo and support Greg's call for, focusing on frequency response. And there are use cases of using thermostats for frequency response. And that's an area we'd like to explore, especially as we're starting to move into trying to bring more HVACs online. And I think if we want to get to 80 megawatts and beyond, really focusing on a product that a thermostat could use or could participate in would really help us hit that number and even grow it. I mean, I think we could put a 0 behind that 80 and make it 800 megawatts if we really are focused on things that thermostats can do.
I'm gonna, I think that's probably like a good segue into this discussion. This slide was empty so that I could take notes on the issues that folks bring up. So I'm going to do my best to try to capture it in a bullet point, but I think this is pretty close, Greg and John, if I'm hearing your suggestion correctly.
All right, thanks to John and Jeff and Greg, and thanks Joel for bringing this up, because that is what we were going to turn to next. I mentioned we would do a time check at the 1 o'clock hour. We missed that by a little bit, but I think we're generally on track to spend the rest of our time addressing item number 3 in Commissioner Glotfelty's memo from August 14th, which is paraphrased, what do we need to do to get to 80 megawatts and beyond? And so then I do want to reserve just a couple minutes at the end for us to talk about logistics of our next meeting and any final things that people want to cover. So maybe we can go till about 1:50 or so. So the next 30 minutes talking about this particular issue. And Joel, I'll let you drive and take all of our good ideas. But with that, who wants to kind of kick off the discussion? We heard ERCOT's presentation on the blocky concept. You've got additional items here on the screen. Happy to continue talking about those things or adding additional items on this page. We have, just to kick it off while we wait for hands to come up, we have talked before about the caps. There are various caps in this pilot program. There's the 80 megawatt cap. There's the nobody can be more than 20% of the 80 megawatt cap. So lots of caps to think about. So dig back in your mind and think about all the things that we've talked about over the last 2 years, and we'll start jotting them down and really fleshing them out. But Resmi, I'll turn it over to you, and we'll go in the order of the raised hands.
Not necessarily on the roadmap, but the question about the blocky load, we think it is the right direction and it will bring more megawatts. And my understanding is that it's just the governing document change. So there is no timeline for that as such. Is that correct? And so once a governing document is approved, then this will be enabled. Is that the expectation?
Yeah, I think from ERCOT's perspective, that's all that would be required is just the governing document to go through the process and get approved. with the edits.
Board approval, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Rosemary. Yes, I'm up next here. Going back to the program cap topic, and I think this is something that maybe another opportunity for, I guess, low-hanging fruit, something we can do in the governing document without necessarily, too much changes on ERCOT's front. But this kind of gets to one of Commissioner Gladfelty's questions about larger sites participating in ADER. From Enchanted Rock's perspective, that's not so much about increasing the 1 megawatt limit, but on trying to get individual sites that are under a megawatt, but on the larger end of the scale into the program. As it stands, Enchanted Rock has, on our own, something like 33 megawatts or so of 800 kW sites. So these are kind of small to medium, like commercial type facilities that could participate in the ADER program, but for the existing program caps to specific load zones. One of the challenges when you're looking at 800 kW blocks against the program caps is that what others have mentioned about enrolling excess capacity to handle potential performance risk in the ancillary services. It gets riskier to do when all you can fit into a particular load zone ADR submission is 2 or 3 individual sites. So, I recognize there are concerns about gobbling up the existing cap that could go towards a lot of good work that needs to be done at the residential scale. So in my mind, I'm wondering if there's some type of leeway in ERCOT's mind to maybe set up a separate pot that won't cannibalize the megawatt cap for residential ADERs to facilitate some of these larger scale opportunities. We're thinking like at minimum, we would probably feel comfortable with at least 4 sites to aggregate and manage around that risk. But if we're trying to leave the door open for other participants with larger sites on the sub 1 megawatt spectrum, obviously the cap needs to be larger than for just one participant in this kind of commercial sized ADER buckets. So I'll kind of toss that out there, and happy to circle back with our COP folks separately if that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess it's my turn, Joel. I just in response to that, I don't think we necessarily see an issue with kind of what you're suggesting, as long as we kind of have some guardrails on to avoid like cannibalization, or we're sort of appropriately adjusting the caps to allow continued participation if some of these larger resources kind of get there. But I also kind of wanted to follow on with an observation. We very much share what John and Bandera were saying about smart thermostats being a really great vehicle for scaling this thing. And we've reached out to John. I mean, we definitely are intrigued by this ApolloWare solution, although, one of the things we're going to have to take into account is whether it sort of reconciles with a rep business model as opposed to sort of Bandera's role. I don't know that we could necessarily accommodate sort of deployment of a hardware solution in and of ourselves without someone else, maybe a TDU or someone else kind of helping us get there with that. But short of that, I mean, we've been looking at premise level validation for our smart thermostats, and I think some of the blocky conversation and vision that ERCOT laid out helps us on one side of that. But I think just in terms of being able to sort of validate what our thermostats are doing at the premise level, we do come up against sort of, you know, smart meter Texas limitations that we pointed out in a filing we put in midday yesterday, that sort of cap the total number of smart thermostats that we could have participating in our own aggregation at something like 500. So I think finding some way around that, whether it is what we suggested, moving SMT to ERCOT or creating an exemption for ADER participants and easy IDs that are registered in ADERs to get that smart meter data, would go a long way to our ability to really sort of start scaling our aggregation on the basis of the smart thermostats we'd like to include.
Rajiv, I'm just trying to capture this briefly, but I guess you've written more about it in comments, so hopefully that's enough on language.
The specific limitations are that we're limited to 1,000 smart meter reads per day per TDU, and we're limited to 2 meter reads per ESID per hour, and the first meter read is effectively, we need it for baselining purposes, so it's almost like 1 meter read per hour.
I guess we've got Ned next up on queue.
Thanks, Joel. You know, just one thing that has occurred to me is we've been talking about, you know, what the roadmap to 80 megawatts and beyond is you know, a lot of times in gardening you hear that, you know, when you plant something, you go through 3 phases. First it sleeps, then it creeps, and then it leaps. And I think that's probably a little bit of what we're likely seeing in the development here is, you know, you had a couple you know, early well, I'll say some folks that had probably had a higher concentration of customers that have the kinds of devices that lend themselves to ADR participation. You see them you know, get out there early, and a lot of others are doing a lot of work to get there, and you know, it just takes a little bit of time for the to be able to get to the scale necessary to get into the ADER. But we also shouldn't discount, you know, the activity that's happening outside of the ADER, the formal ADER program, right? There's, you know, not every egg needs to be in the ADER basket. And so, you know, for instance, not discounting that smart thermostats can play an important role in here, but there are also other programs and policies, frankly, that will also leverage smart thermostats, like the implementation of Senate Bill 1699, for instance. So I just wanted to kind of throw those out as, you know, considerations as we're thinking about, you know, what are we trying to get to, and what are the number of you know, tools and frankly opportunity costs for folks that are participating. Just knowing that there's not a single path. But you know, another item that is just something that I think we all need to be thinking about is, you know, when we're talking about incentivizing participation in the market, is you know, you need to have market signals, and that is a key feature of the market we've got. So you know, if the market is strong, I know there was a lot of interest in you know, providing ECRS after last summer. You know, that signal may not be as strong after this last summer, for instance. So that's just another important context to keep in mind is, folks respond to the signals that are out there. That's all. Thanks.
Go ahead, Amy. Amy, if you're talking, we can't hear you.
Was that me? Yeah, something
Yeah,
cut
there you
out
go.
for a second.
No worries.
Great. I just wanted to add to the list of topics to talk about is, and I think this goes along with the discussion on the blocky solution from ERCOT, which is 5-second telemetry, and just any of those other technical barriers and how it's addressed and if it's addressed fully. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I think in order to make sure we're on that roadmap to get to that amount. And Joel, I appreciate your comments of, being aware of the cap size, but also aware that it's having room for a diversity of the different sizes of aggregations. But so I think the technical conversation needs to happen to make sure we have a roadmap to make sure we have all diversity of sizes included.
Thanks, Amy. The first point you were making, want to make sure I captured this correctly. Were you suggesting there are telemetry requirements that act as a barrier to scale?
Correct. Yep. As a technical barrier to, that's exactly right.
Okay. Thanks. We've got Jared next.
Yeah, this is Jared Blue with EV Energy. I think another thing to consider is assessing how we can integrate electric vehicles into the program. We can directly control EVs, and in the context of, depending on the technology, but in the context of residential loads, they're pretty large on an individual basis. They're also highly flexible. It's usually, I think the average charging time for somebody with a residential charger at night is 2 hours or less, whereas they might be plugged in for 14 hours. So we can really control when that charging is occurring. And that can also scale quickly just as EVs adoption is increasing. And that's even before we bring in vehicle to grid considerations into this, because that technology is still a little bit nascent. But I think that could really help meet enrollment targets and scale participation.
Thanks, Jared. Are there, I guess, on your comment, are there any specific barriers that you see for those resources, or is it just a matter of getting the word out and having more EVs out there?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think we're still assessing kind of what the barriers might be. I think telemetry could be one. We participated in a few programs in the UK market. So I think it's something that I need to do a little more digging in with my team and really see what barriers exist at this point. Yeah.
Okay. Put a placeholder in the notes there. Thanks. We've got Bob up next.
Hi. Yeah, thanks, Joel. I wonder if one of the barriers isn't how accurate the response has to be, particularly in the beginning, given this is a small amount. Seems like we could be more flexible if I'm understanding it correctly. So, for example, what Bandera is doing is the Cadillac response. Not everybody's going to be able to do that or at that level, but it would be reasonable, for instance, for an aggregator over time to develop a model to understand the behavior of its aggregation, know how it will respond to call for response, And to get more accurate over time, they could even do a bunch of testing before they joined the program. And they wouldn't have access. We do it sort of like we do now for third parties participating in ERS. That is that the validation comes 24 hours later. We trying to get, Smart Meter Texas to where it could respond and provide real-time data. Probably not going to happen real simply, real quickly. But if we were flexible, as long as the response is in the right direction within a reasonable amount of time, reaches at least what was bid, and there are, means for accounting to dock somebody that's short, you're going to have some aggregations light, some heavy, a lot of it will make up for each other, and we're still talking small numbers. So I'm wondering if we couldn't allow the virtual telemetry of a modeled prediction or forecast response, and then allow the third parties some time to improve on that, if that makes any sense.
Okay. I think I captured your comments here, Bob. Let me know if you think I got to edit anything.
That'll get it.
All right,
Hey, Joel,
thanks.
I'm gonna break in real quick and ask a question that Rami put in the chat, and maybe it's a question for Jared in terms of whether we have any EVs in ADER participation today.
Not that I'm aware of, but somebody might have more information than me there, but I don't believe so that I've seen.
Bandera doesn't, I can tell you that right now.
Yeah, this is Kenneth Ragsdale with ERCOT. So I was going to, and Joel, thanks for asking about the specifics on the EV charging. So the ADER pilot today allows EV charging. We haven't seen any, or maybe just a few, come in through the DOTAs. But I do think we need to more clearly evaluate, are there any barriers for EV charging? And I'm hoping there's not any, but I think that was the one comment I wanted to make. And I'm hoping some EV chargers can get into some of these DOTAs and actually be active.
Thanks, Ken. Sorry to interrupt, Joel. I'll let you keep going down the list.
No problem. We've got Resmi up next.
So one of the initial things that we said for the ADER was that if it is a load, then we already have existing programs like ALR, CLR, and CLR and all those. So it should be injection as well with batteries or an aggregation. But when I think about it, that is for scarce dispatchable resources, because ALR needs to be a controllable load resource, and an aggregation of NCLR, there is no concept like that. So a blocky load that is coming in, do we need to continue to keep the restriction that that aggregation of blocky load needs to have the injection as well? I don't think there is that need, because there is no other product that can provide the aggregation of NCLR. And it may be beneficial to have that battery that you include in defined as another controllable ADER, and split all the non-controllable ones together. Yeah, I would say just for the blocky battery.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks, Resmi. Looks like we're back to Rajiv.
Yeah, I'll be quick. Just a follow on to Resmi's point and sort of why would you need to have load resources question. I mean, one of the challenges with the aggregation we're working on is that it is heterogeneous. It's not just one device type. We have thermostats in there, we have batteries in there, but part of the reason why we're excited about this is having these sort of multi-asset aggregations that to us kind of lends itself to customer centrism. Like if a customer has more than one device type, we could potentially be optimizing and kind of sending them more value on the basis of their various devices participation in ADER. I would say the other piece here is sort of just on the how to return more value to customers. Something we've suggested a couple times here before and in our comments is for ECRS and non-spin, we should remove the 2 and 4 hour duration requirements on those ancillaries, given that ERCOT is procuring them on an hourly basis. It's basically just diluting the value and downrating the capacity of our ADERs for those ancillaries in the first instance.
All right, thanks, Rajiv. I guess
that's not an ADR issue, though.
No, not specifically to ADER, but it could potentially be a recommendation of this task force.
I guess, Rajiv, the point you're making about heterogeneous ADERs and adding value for customers, are there any like technical issues associated with that you're intending to raise, or just that
it's just why it stands for the point that I don't think we should just be focusing on resources capable of injecting and kind of focused on all of the above. In addition to Resmi's excellent point about NCLRs and the fact that they don't have an aggregation pathway currently.
Okay. Okay. Thanks for that clarification. Right, we've got Greg up next.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond real quickly to Ken's point where he asked if there were any barriers to participation for EV charging load. The first might be kind of obvious. You know, we need customer buy-in, and of course, the potential or the primary use case for EV charging is to gain charge to get to your next destination, right? So where there are products that could potentially involve long deployments, multi-hour deployments, it's very hard to get that customer buy-in and structure it as part of the charging experience. Just to reiterate, you know, primary frequency response from an EV would be a very gentle use case where that service could come from an EV charger or EV vehicle without interrupting the primary use case to get, you know, from point A to point B. The other concern that may be unique to certain portfolios at this point is the cap. You know, where we hit the cap introducing vehicles, we can't do it until the cap is increased. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Greg. I think that last point, I guess, you know, in the context of this discussion, is a good thing if we're able to get ADRs to that cap faster. So I'll make note of that. Next, we've got Carmen.
Yeah, thanks. I have just a reference question. As we talk about like the path to 80, or John even said 800 megawatts, wondering what this group is seeing as kind of our best reference point for, total capacity that is currently in, close to ADER solutions, because we have a lot of these conversations. If we change this rule, then we'll have potential here and there, but we never seem to be kind of having a concrete sense, not saying that we necessarily could, of how much megawatts that might unlock. And I'm just wondering if we have kind of a common reference point of how much potential is out there, and or or where we're currently getting it from, that we could use as an anchor for some of those conversations, or just education on my part. And if not, I will look. If anyone wants to point me in the right direction, please do.
It's a fair question. I guess perhaps sets up prioritization in a roadmap better if we've got line of sight to what gets you the most megawatts, most bang for your buck, as ERCOT put it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that brings us to the end of our queue. Jason, I can turn it back over to you for the last slide then.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, a helpful list of things to for us to tackle. We don't have time in the last 12 minutes to solve all of those issues, clearly, but appreciate you all helping us come up with those issues that we need to think about more. One of the things that Commissioner Glotfelty asked us to do is to meet at least monthly for the remainder of the year. We need to talk now about our next meeting and how we want to start tackling some of the items that we came up with today. And I encourage folks to not wait until then to talk amongst yourselves for real action items so that we can advance some of these ideas. And we'll come back and revisit them at our next meeting, including starting to tackle, at least initially, some of the other questions in Commissioner Glotfelty's memo. So for those of you that haven't taken a look at his August 14th memo, he raised 4 items. We've talked about one today. And he kind of concludes the question we talked about today with what needs to be done. And so I think we need to, as a task force, come up with a consensus recommendation on what needs to be done. ERCOT has laid out a path on the blocky concept. I think we need to make an assessment as a task force. Do we have consensus that is what we need to do? Are there other things we need to do? And so plan on the next meeting us tackling that issue and trying to bring it to a consensus conclusion. With that, what we did to schedule this meeting, I know it was on very short notice because we were waiting on our new task force members to be appointed. And so we didn't have a lot of time to get our September meeting in. Given that, I was gonna plan to send a doodle poll around again to the task force members, PUC, OPUC, and ERCOT, targeting the weeks of October 7 and 14 to see if we can get some critical mass of folks together. If the doodle poll doesn't work and you want me to do it a different way, speak now, and we can consider a different way. Otherwise, Joel and I will work on that and get a consensus date out and give you plenty of notice to plan around for the next one. But those were the weeks that I was thinking we should get back together again. Any objection to that? We also, since we've worked to make sure we have correct contact information for each of the representatives for the new member organizations in the task force. It sounded as we introduced folks today that we may have some substitutes from our historical members of the task force too. So I'll circle back with all of you just to confirm contact information for this third year. And then we'll post an updated task force member list so that everybody has access to that. In our remaining minutes, is there anything else that needs to be on our to-do list in the near term? Or anything else that anybody wants to bring up before we call it a day?
I guess I do have a question maybe for the group, Jason. As you're talking about the other Glatfelty memo items, like a couple of the questions that were raised by Commissioner Glatfelty are notably absent from our roadmap to 80 megawatts. And I don't want to assume folks' thoughts on this. So maybe just want to ask the question directly. Do folks feel like the first two questions in Commissioner Glatfelty's memo about non-rep aggregators and about opening aggregations or opening access to devices for aggregators, like that those issues are important to getting to 80 megawatts, or side issues at this point? Because I guess we didn't have those on our list. Got Ned?
Thanks, Joel. Yeah, I think when you look at the list that we just came up with, there's a lot of other things that folks are more focused on as what might be able to help get to 80 megawatts. And as of course, what I said, we are in the phase where there are a lot of there's a lot of development that may not necessarily be as evident as what you see in the the over the hump ADERs, but there is a lot of work going on outside of the formal program. So I recognize there's interest in it, but I'll first of all say a big chunk of what helps you get there is making sure that you can get customer buy-in, and the load serving entity is going to be in the best place to provide the full value to customers and get them involved, provide the incentives for them to participate in a way that makes sense for them, and work with the third parties to help bring those solutions to market. So recognizing there's interest there, but I think we still have a lot of other primary issues to try to tackle before that becomes probably a salient one.
Thanks, Ned. Captain John?
Yeah, I just wanted to pile on to Ned's comment that the load serving entity is in the best position of serving the customer. And reading through this list of issues and inventory, there's little talk about the customer, and I think I heard some comments that, from throughout the meeting, that we got to be focused on the customer. We got to get enrollment. If we don't get enrollment, we're not going to do it. And it doesn't really relate to this task force. And Ned's exactly right. And the point of our presentation today was to show that what we built, I dispute that it's a Cadillac. I think it's probably a Chevy, pickup truck or a Ford, depending on who you talk in the line crew at Bandera Electric. And it's a workhorse, and it's something that could deploy across ERCOT. But the bigger point is that we built it without any of this list here. We built it under the current ERCOT rules and protocols. And so I do think we would have been doing it anyways. And just wanted to recognize that, yeah, there's work going on outside of this task force, and I think we will get there.
Great. Thanks, John. Resmi?
I just wanted to support what Ned was saying, and the issue that was raised at the beginning, the impact on the load serving entities when other entities provide it can maybe affect the confidence of the program in negative way. Load serving entities are at a better position to interact with the end use consumer and provide the service that best suits them.
Thanks. And Rajiv?
Since we're piling on here, I'll just pile on and say we agree with that. Load serving entities, in our view, at present are in the best position. And part of the reason I think why we didn't raise some of the other issues in the memo, the first one in particular on open comms, is more, I thought the focus here was more on the roadmap. I would say we're supportive of that issue, but there's plenty to chew on here too.
And I guess we have one message in the chat from Paul at Nationwide Energy Partners. I don't know if, Paul, you want to expand on your comment in the chat, or?
Hey, Joel, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, no, I think all the issues that the commissioner outlined are important. And, again, you've heard me say this, it's really the only way to engage multifamily properties in this effort, because otherwise we're only talking about single family homeowners. And I think we're missing out on obviously a huge segment of the residential customers.
So I guess you're raising a new point here. Multifamily properties, the barrier being the, I guess, the third-party access to devices, or the ability of a non-rep to aggregate?
Yes, yes, both.
Okay. Okay. Well, I guess there's one vote. But those topics probably deserve some more discussion for the agenda separately at the next meeting. Just wanted to make sure we weren't missing those items from the roadmap, or just assuming they're automatically in because Commissioner Botfelty said they should be, or they're not because we've got consensus that they're longer term issues. So sounds like there's room for discussion.
Thanks, Joel, for walking us through that, and thanks everybody for participating. It's my intent that we address all four items in Commissioner Glotfelty's memo in some way. I think there will be some where we have consensus on it, and some where we may not, and some where we have immediate action items, and some where we may not. And so appreciate you all giving us an early look at some of the thinking on some of his other issues, and we will spend some time on the rest of them. With that, let me keep my time commitment to you all and bring us to a close today. I want to thank Ryan and Mark from ERCOT for the time in putting the presentation together and walking us through answering questions, and John and Jeff from Bandera and Greg from Tesla with update on your efforts. Welcome also to the new task force members. Hopefully this didn't scare you away. I appreciate everybody that's new to the group participating today. Please reach out to me or Joel if you have any questions or how we can make this better. We always want to make sure we're moving down the field and advancing this issue, and welcome your feedback to make sure that we continue to get better. The material that was presented today has been filed in Project 53911 already. So if you want to download that, you're able to do so at this point. This meeting was recorded and will be posted on our YouTube channel and provided also to the commission, and we'll provide everybody a link to that once it's up and posted. And I will send out a doodle poll to schedule our next meeting in the middle part of October. So keep an eye out for that doodle poll. We'll give folks a number of days to respond before we schedule it. So with that, before we bring it to a close, Joel, do you have anything else for the good of the cause?
Oh, thank you, Jason.
Yep. Anybody from PUC staff before we close?
No, thank you. Thank you. This was very educational. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining. Have a great weekend. We'll get back together soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.